And nevertheless, the Death Star petition got enough. So the Defense Department had to do a study and issue a statement that it would cost something like 10 times the national budget for 50 years to construct a Death Star, and it was not the administration's policy to destroy planets. So, in any case, that was, and there was a similar problem with the NRA and the CNN broadcaster Pierce Morgan, where the NRA, who had insulted the gun lobby, and so then they wanted a petition that Pierce Morgan should be deported back to Britain, and that got 125,000 petitions. So therefore, yeah. So in any case, self-selection will present an opportunity for groups to mobilize and capture. Which is one of the reasons that I'm interested in random sampling, because you cannot volunteer yourself to be in a random sample. So you have a scientific microcosm of the public, not the people who feel strongly, not the people who mobilize themselves, but a good sample. And of course, that's the merit of public opinion polling, is that it's based upon good sampling when done properly. But the problem, the limit, public opinion polling, most polls, public opinion polling, random sampling with raw opinion, that has the merit that it gives you a picture of public opinion such as it is, to the extent that it is. It gives you a picture of what the people are thinking, if they are thinking, or whatever, with the exception that sometimes you'll get phantom opinions if they haven't thought about it at all. Nevertheless, it gives you a picture of public opinion as it is. And so, in fact, for those of you who follow these things, you may know that modern public opinion polling was really launched by George Gallup in 1936, when he had this idea of a public opinion poll in the presidential election. And there was a gigantic slop called, a magazine called The Literary Digest, which collected millions, not thousands, millions of self-selected votes in the presidential election. So Gallup had this idea, you need a scientific sample to really represent public opinion, and he thought he could predict the 1936 presidential election. And he was just a kid at that time. Nobody believed him, because they weren't thinking about sampling. The public doesn't understand. They were just thinking, you could have a small number and it could be a sample, and you could do better than the Literary Digest that has millions and millions. You're crazy. So he, by the way, he was a very creative young guy. He couldn't get anybody to back his idea, so he hired a dirigible, one of those big blimps, yeah. And he flew it around with a sign that said, "Will your newspaper have George Gallup's prediction of the election?" And he finally got the Washington Post to pay for the first national public opinion poll for a presidential election. But they made this deal. They said they would pay for it, but if the Literary Digest got a better result than he did, he'd have to give back all the money. So he predicted a landslide for Franklin Roosevelt, and he predicted Franklin Roosevelt would win, and the Literary Digest predicted Alf Landon would win in a landslide. And so he won. He kept the money, and the public opinion poll, as we know it, was born. And George Gallup had the aspiration, he thought that it was going to lead to informed public opinion being an input for public policy. But he was wrong. But here's the interesting thing about it. After his triumph, he gave a speech at Princeton in which he said that the Literary Digest would bring the democracy of the New England town meeting to the large-scale nation state. Now, what is the democracy of the New England town meeting? Everybody gathers together, and they discuss the issues, and then they vote, right? And everybody hears all the arguments on either side. So he said, the public opinion poll will do that because there will be the views of different candidates and experts, etc., that will go out by radio and newspapers. There was no television in those days, 1936. There was no internet in those days, but there was radio and newspapers. So everybody will hear the different views, and then their opinions will be reflected back in the public opinion poll.